Welcome to The Human Affair, a low-key profile of people in the ever-changing world around them. In this program, we'll share interesting thoughts, discussions, and experiences that we think you'll enjoy. Now, here's your host, Dr. Wilbur Bloom, Professor of International Relations, United States International University.
Hello, I'm Bill Bloom. My guests today are Mr. Robert Moses, who's Vice President of the UN Association of San Diego, Ms. Sylvia Lurie, who is the Executive Director of the UN Association of San Diego County, and Mr. George Katakalidis of the San Diego Sockers. Well, I'm happy that you're all here today, and we're going to have a lot to talk about just as soon as we take this brief pause for a commercial.
Store-wide, no interest breakthrough. No down payment, no monthly payments, no interest till July. Limited time only.
This poor guy's been waiting.
Sockers.
Well, I've been here approximately about 6 months now, since the beginning of the season, and I'd like to tell you that I'm falling in love with the city. It is really a pretty city.
Well, we think it's a pretty nice place, too, and I'm sure a lot of our audience have seen you play. Probably in a little different costume, but I'm sure they recognize you.
Definitely, yes.
Bob, you're the Vice President of the United Nations Association of San Diego County. Could you tell us a little bit about what the association is and what it does?
The UN Association is the closest thing to a semi-official educational organization throughout this country and other countries, as you would find, short of being officially proclaimed by the UN. Basically, it has a simple task: providing education and information about the United Nations, its workings, about the specialized agencies, the history of the UN, its undertakings, its challenges for the future. And in that, the UN Association has had a history almost as long in this country as the UN itself, close to 40 years now.
Well, do you find that people know very much about the UN and how many countries are in it, or is this something that you have to constantly work on?
No, if that were the case, there would be no need for a United Nations Association, Bill. It's always heartening to know that there is such interest, particularly among the young in the schools, among the student and the youth groups, about the United Nations. In the early period, the United Nations had one challenge, one idealism, the hope for a world at peace. And as we now are in the 40th anniversary of the UN, that constant yearning for peace has been blended with the idealism of the young on developmental, on human rights, and other concerns and issues that the United Nations is all about.
Well, when it was founded in San Francisco, there were not as many members as there are now. How many were there? Do you recall?
There were 50 founding nations of the United Nations, including the United States, of course, and Mexico, 48 others. When the San Francisco Conference concluded in June of 1945, these 50 nations signed the UN Charter in late June of that year. The UN Charter took effect in October, on the 24th of October, and by that time Poland became the 51st founding member. So when the UN was born in 1945, there were 51 founding members, and there are today well over 3 times that number. Close to 160 nations of the world are members of the world family, the UN.
Well, that's almost all the nations, isn't it?
Just about all. There may be one or two that are not members of the UN.
Yes. Well, that certainly is an exciting idea, that people representing that many nations can sit down and talk about problems and differences and conduct programs in a cooperation. Ms. Lurie, you're now the Executive Director of the association here, and I understand this is a fairly new role for you.
Yes, I started in May of this year.
May of 1984.
Right.
Yes. And have you been around San Diego long?
We moved here from New Jersey in 1968, and I spent many years as mother and wife and went back to get my MBA about 3 years ago and decided that I would like to work for a nonprofit organization. And when this opportunity arose, I was very interested in it.
So you were interested in the work of the organization
Right.
before you took on this role, of course. What are some of the programs that you're conducting now?
Well, we're very interested because, as Bob mentioned, we're very interested in educating and getting youth interested in what goes on in the United Nations. We have found a tremendous interest and desire among not only college students but high school students. And what really alerted me to this was when I heard my daughter talking, and she was approximately 17 years old at the time, and it startled me to realize that this generation was very concerned about the possibility of being destroyed and not living out their full lives. And at first I took it very lightly, but I realized that this was a real concern among young people.
I noticed this with college students with whom I reacted. They're very concerned about the questions of world peace and the alternatives to nuclear destruction.
That's right.
So I believe that maybe young people have greater interest in this now than perhaps at any time since the UN was founded.
And they do realize the importance of international cooperation. And that, of course, is what the UN is all about.
What are some of the activities that you have here, Bob, in terms of the organization's role in the community?
The United Nations Association this year is very pleased to be involving not only itself, but in association with other groups and institutions in San Diego County and in our border city Tijuana in Baja California, programs and activities and events that are observing the 40th year of the founding of the UN. We're, of course, very pleased and proud that California was the birthplace of the UN, and as I've indicated, it is now blending together some of this visionary idealism that the young people have here in San Diego and in Tijuana towards programming throughout the rest of this year. We've already had about 2.5 months of activities, but there will be quite a number of them that remain about which the public will learn a great deal more on the vision and the purpose of the United Nations, its agencies, and their work.
Well, now you're planning these in cooperation then with many other organizations in the community?
Yes, we're working very closely with all of the universities of San Diego County and of the University of Baja California. In Baja California, there is no equivalent United Nations Association, and so the University of Baja California is our institutional counterpart as involvement and interest on that side of the border is carried out for the rest of the year. We learned, for example, that in Mexico there is a great deal more emphasis on October 24th, United Nations Day, within the school system than there is here in the United States. And we find this heartening as we work together for the remainder of this year so that a binational sharing can see something lasting, and we can share and learn something from our country to the south, and undoubtedly they can share and learn something from us as well.
How did you first become interested in this, Bob?
I was first exposed to the work of the United Nations Association as a university student back, I guess, late 40s, early 50s, and became a member at that time. And then later, about 30 years ago, while in the state of Wisconsin, I became active in the founding of the Wisconsin United Nations Association at a time when Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, then devoting almost all of her volunteer time, was traveling the length and breadth of the United States in helping to organize chapters, local and state, of the UN Association. And later in the 1950s, I served for a period of about 3 years as the president of the Wisconsin chapter of the United Nations Association. I continued my interest and involvement throughout the years in Wisconsin and in my native home state of North Dakota and in Northern California, where I lived for about 10 years before coming to San Diego at the end of the 1970s. And I've been an officer now for some a little over 4 years of the San Diego chapter of the UN Association as a vice president of the local chapter.
It's interesting to remember that Eleanor Roosevelt actually opened the doors to our local United Nations Association.
Is that so?
Yes,
Tell me about that.
Well, I don't know too much about it, but I heard that they, as she was touring the country and promoting the idea, she actually physically went from city to city and opened the doors to each association. There are approximately 115 associations across the United States, and this was one of the cities where she came and actually physically opened the doors for us.
This activity must bring you in contact with a lot of very interesting people. I would think that you meet many people from abroad and...
Yes, when the United Nations Association conducts events and sponsors or co-sponsors conferences, there are always officials invited and attending from other countries, from the United Nations itself, from the government of this country in Washington, and on most, if not all of those occasions, they are invited to come and visit the headquarters building of the United Nations Association, which is located in Balboa Park, and observe the international flavor of that two-story building in Balboa Park. So we've been inviting officials from throughout the world. They come to San Diego, they love this area, and they visit our UN Association building.
How do people join the association? Is there any requirements, or how do you get members?
It's a membership organization, and members may either be family members, individual members. We have membership open to seniors. We have membership open to students. We have organizational memberships, business groups, church groups, university groups. And it's a composite membership. Most of it is individual membership, but it's open to the broad length of the entire community throughout San Diego
So
County.
it's quite a cross-section of people in the community.
Right now we have 500 units of membership. We call them units because, as Bob mentioned, some of them are church groups and some of them are individuals, some of them are other organizations. I find the volunteers a fascinating group of people. The association is staffed only by myself and a secretary, and the rest of the people are volunteers, and every day there's a very interesting group of ladies that come in and work there, doing various tasks, either working in the office or in the gift shop or for UNICEF. And it's just very heartening to see how enthusiastic they are. And some of these ladies, I feel like a kid when I work there, because I'm talking about people that are in their mid-70s and early 80s. And you would never know it to see them.
Well, of course, we've got a little wider composite now, Sylvia, in that 1985 is not only the 40th anniversary year of the founding of the United Nations and this wide array of community events continuing month by month throughout the year, but 1985 is also International Youth Year, so designated by the UN General Assembly. And we now have, for the last few months, a very active youth component of the United Nations Association that is programming special emphasis with the school systems, with the youth groups that focus attention on the contributions and interest and idealism of young people in this country and in this world.
So many families will be finding some emphasis on the United Nations coming into the home from many different sources.
Yeah.
Yes.
The students at the universities are mainly students who belong to Model UN clubs. And the Model UN clubs are very interesting associations. They have them at the junior high school, the high school, and the college level.
I'm sure our viewers would be interested in knowing more about how that works.
Well, for example, in the junior high school, a social studies teacher will take on the project of having one of her classes or a group of classes represent a country. And they will spend a year, the school year, studying all facets of the country, so that they can represent the country. And in May in San Diego, we have a Model UN program. This past May, we had 500 students from 15 schools in San Diego, and they called a General Assembly. They made up a problem that the Security Council had to meet and try and solve. And although they did not solve the problem, the students came away with a feeling that, isn't it wonderful that countries can get together, talk, understand, cooperate, and diffuse the situation so that there is no war.
Yeah. And had learned so many things out of that process besides the international awareness, that also learned a lot of things about specific countries and about economy and geography and all the other facets.
If I could add a little to this too, Sylvia, we're grateful to the Human Affair for agreeing to air several subsequent half-hour programs in the months to follow. And in the program to be aired on the 20th of April, there will be some of the leadership of the university student groups, including the president of the San Diego State University Model UN Club, the most active Model United Nations club in San Diego County. So the audience will get a better full breakdown of actually what is involved from the lips of one of the students.
I look forward to meeting those students and talking to them. You know, when I was in university back in about the same period you were, in the late 40s, they held a Model UN, well, I guess it had to be in the 50s, wasn't it, at USC. And Mrs. Roosevelt was there. And that was a very exciting period. It was amazing to see how well the students at that time could take on the role and sort of walk in the moccasins, as the American Indian saying goes, of the other person, and understand the issues and the positions they were trying to represent in that exercise.
It's an excellent training ground for future leaders in international affairs or economics or business. The Model United Nations program has proved very beneficial to adult leaders throughout the country in whatever walk of life.
Well, as a matter of fact, out of that particular Model UN, several people who later were world leaders were there as students. So it was not just an academic exercise, but it was real preparation for some of the people who later represented their countries in the international arena. So that was a very exciting aspect of it too. I understand that you're going to be having a benefit with the Soccers here for the
That's
UN.
right, we are. I think we're going to do our part in the International Youth Year of 1985. We want to celebrate the UN 40th anniversary, and so on March the 22nd, which is a Friday night, we're going to have International Youth Night with the Soccers, and it's going to be a great evening, actually. The outline of the evening goes, first of all, we're going to have a great opponent, which is going to be the Chicago Sting. And
The
Chicago Sting. They have these little bees with stingers on them, you know, and they call them the Sting. But actually, they're a very good team, and they're getting ready for the playoff drive, and so are we. And every time we play them, there's a very close game, usually 1 goal difference or 2 goal difference, and so we're going to start that off. And then the halftime show will be a whole bunch of children dressed up in ethnic costumes, and they will be doing a little performance to the tune of "It's a Small World," and I think that should be something that incredible sight to see. And after that, hopefully we'll end it with a victory and we'll all be happy.
Well, I'll tell you, George, that the folks involved in the United Nations Association, the young people involved in International Youth Year and others, have been looking forward to this building for a couple of months now. And we're certainly looking forward to this big game on the 22nd and hope that folks will join us out there and see the Soccers defeat the Sting.
Yes, definitely defeat. That would be nice. When we were talking about the UN and its the fact that the world peace and so on, and about all the internationals getting together and more or less talking it out and being very orderly about all aspects of international life. Well, one of the things about soccer is that on our team right now we have quite a few ethnics, but they're all Americans now.
We're going to have to take a break for commercial, but let's come back to this because soccer is an international game too.
Yes.
We'll be right back.
Watch out for the other guy. That's good advice.
Soccer is an international sport. Almost everywhere I've ever been in the world, and I've been a lot of places, soccer is very big.
It definitely is, and I think slowly it's going to become very big in this country, and I think that the media exposure to soccer will help us tremendously. It is a great game. It actually is, and we were discussing earlier, I believe, about the fact that in some countries soccer is a means of war. I mean, especially in South America, where two countries are at battle on a soccer field.
They take care of their national pride this way.
They definitely do, and I think it's a great way to solve wars. Wouldn't that be great? Just go out there on the field.
Well, I've seen in many countries the fans get very, very emotional about the outcome of a game, and I don't see that degree of enthusiasm here quite yet, but still I think people enjoy the game a lot.
Yes, I think they do too. It's a matter of education and exposure, and hopefully it'll soon be there. I know for a fact that the San Diego fans have been treated to championship teams in the past, and this year they'll be treated to a championship team also, and they're more educated than the rest of the United States, and I'm glad for that.
Well, tell me a little bit about your own background here. How did you get started in the game? And
okay, well, I was born in Greece, and I left there as a youngster. I was 7 years old, and when my family moved to Canada, Toronto, Canada, and I lived there until the age of about 18. And then from there I turned professional. I went to New York, and I played in New York for 3 years. And from there I went to the San Francisco, San Jose Bay Area, and I lived there for about a year, and from there I fell in love with California. So I said, I have to stay in California. So when the team ended up folding, we ended up coming down to San Diego, and it's been great so far.
Did you start out originally playing with other kids in the street and that sort of thing?
Exactly. Well, back home in Greece, there actually was no other sport, and at times when we didn't even have a soccer ball, we would sort of stuff a sock with a whole bunch of paper and all that, and we would kick that around. And it was fun.
I've seen kids do this all over the world. It seems like in every country that they're doing this.
It's great. You have so much energy as a youngster, and you have to spend your energy somehow.
And you know, I think this illustrates something else, that George here is really an international person. And so many people in the world are now finding their lives intertwined with other countries. I have one son who works in Japan. And I'm certainly sure that in his growing up years, he never thought he would be living that far away from home and earning his living. And
it's definitely the trend of life today. I mean, with increased communication and so much travel going on, it's bound to happen, isn't it?
Well, yes, and I think that makes the work of the UN Association so much more important, too, that in this kind of a world where people are moving about and working with each other in business and in sport and so forth, there's very little room, really, for the old kind of hostility and conflict that used to be the way countries got along.
That's true. I think one of the best things about getting to travel to other countries and see other people is to actually realize that they are just like you. I mean, everywhere I've gone, I've been treated greatly, and all the people have been so nice, and I don't see why other people have biases. I think the only reason they have biases and prejudices is because of lack of education, and they don't know the other people as well, and what they read in the papers and what they hear from other people. And, you know, as it goes down the line, people misconstrue everything.
Yeah, as you have opportunity. Tell me what else the UN Association has in mind for the rest of this year.
The United Nations Association determined in late 1984 that it would observe the 40th anniversary of the founding of the UN throughout the year, 1985, working in conjunction with interests in Tijuana and Baja California, with 4 general themes for each quarter of the year. Now we're just winding down the first 3-month theme that is focusing on the strong need and desire for world peace. We'll be continuing this theme throughout the year, but in each succeeding quarterly period we'll add another new theme. And for the second 3-month period, we will focus upon the UN's work in the developmental field, and at this area, focus on what San Diego and Tijuana are doing in developmental activities jointly. We will move ahead into 1985 for the third 3 months, beginning in July, with a 3-month period emphasizing the art of communication, and it is an art, it is a science. And then we'll conclude with an emphasis on water and water resources.
Well, I hate to cut you off when you're talking about my favorite subject, but they tell me we got to go. So it's been great, George.
It's been a pleasure.
Having you on the program, Sylvia and Bob, and I hope you'll tune in again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.